Hey there, Comics Alliance fans. This is Matt Wilson, co-host and producer of the War Rocket Ajax podcast. I'm back. We're back after a couple weeks off with another clip from an episode of War Rocket Ajax, the one that's going to be going up on warrocketajax.com this Monday. Well, technically next Monday, I suppose. But either way, we're talking about some of the comics that came out last week. We're talking about some good ones. We're going to be talking about, me and Chris Sims, Big Trouble in Little China #1 by Eric Powell and Brian Churilla, which was a fun time. We're going to be talking about Nailbiter #2 by Josh Williamson and Mike Henderson. And we're also going to be talking about Afterlife with Archie, the first trade paperback. That's by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa and Francesco Francavilla. So check out this clip, and if you want to hear the full episode of War Rocket Ajax, be sure to go to warrocketajax.com on Monday to hear us talk to Meg Lovell, the creator of the webcomic Tagged. But for now, here's this clip. Let's start with a comic that I think both you and I are very excited about, very excited to talk about, and that is Big Trouble in Little China #1, the comic book continuation of the movie that we both love so much.
I really, my biggest question about this comic is, and I know the answer, but how did me and Rusty not get the call when this license was acquired? How did they not just go, hey, let's give it to those two dudes?
That is a good question, but I will say that Eric Powell and Brian Churilla, who are the creative team on this, do pretty much nail the tone of the movie.
Well, yeah, that is the answer. That's why I didn't get the call, because Eric Powell and Brian Churilla, both of whom are amazing creators.
Yeah. The comic basically starts exactly where the movie left off, and has Jack Burton basically just turn around and go back to Chinatown to deal with this demon that has become attached to him, like a companion demon, basically. Shit pretty much jumps off from there. It is very entertaining. It is very much in the spirit of the movie, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. My one complaint about this issue is that the art, weirdly enough, seems very rushed. And I'm not sure why. I don't know if there was some kind of need to get this book out very quickly and a really tight deadline, or what happened exactly. But there are a lot of empty backgrounds. There are a lot of panels with very little detail. There's one panel in particular that stuck out to me as being very strange, where the background characters were basically just like not quite stick figures, but almost. They look like the Pillsbury Doughboy. They were just like these weird blobs that were supposed to kind of indicate people. Other than that, other than some weird art issues, I'm very pleased with how this comic turned out. I actually wrote some preview stuff for this issue. I wrote some stuff about when all the covers were released, what they were going to look like, and included pictures on Comics Alliance. And as a part of that, writing that news item, I went and checked to see if there had been any other comic adaptations of Big Trouble in Little China. And as it turns out, there have been, but they were by very
Which is
small...
weird, because I have not, you would think we would have heard about them, and I do not recall hearing about any of them.
Well,
until this one.
Yeah, it was by a very small publisher, and it was called Jack Burton Adventures or something like that. Stuff that had nothing to do with him being in Chinatown. It seems like it wasn't promoted at all, and it was very short-lived. And I'd say I got to take a quick look at some pages from that comic, and I would say compared to that, this is definitely the Big Trouble in Little China comic I would prefer to read. I really enjoyed it, and am going to pick up issue 2 for sure.
That's good to hear, because I was even with two creators that I really liked, licensed books are always really weird. Like you can get a creator that you otherwise really like on a licensed property, and it turns out you like different things about that property. And like you said, you and I are both huge fans of Big Turtle in Little China. So I've been wondering how it was gonna work.
I think
even
one
as
of
a
the
fan of Powell and Churilla.
Yeah, I think one encouraging thing about this book in particular is that John Carpenter is actually involved with it, sort of as like a consultant. So it's official.
Oh, does he do the score?
Yeah, he's doing all the
Is it
score.
printed on one of those greeting cards where you open it up and you've got that little
Yep, I think that's exactly right. Man, I wish they would put... I really want that in an issue of this comic now. Another comic I wanted to talk about very quickly is Nailbiter number 2. The second issue of the new series by Joshua Williamson and Mike Henderson, and it all focuses on serial killers. I actually interviewed Josh Williamson about this series at C2E2. We talked quite a bit about all the serial killer background and stuff. I'll link to that in the show notes. I think this series is really good. I really like the way it's like delving into the idea of serial killers and where they come from and how it affects the people around them, like what it's like to be from a town where a serial killer is from. Because this particular town and this particular comic is full of not just one, but like dozens or more than a dozen serial killers who have come from there. There's sort of a lead serial killer who's not necessarily the lead of the book, but he's the one you see the most of in the comic. His name is Warren, and he's presented in this comic as so sort of amazingly creepy. It's really like interesting the way that he's presented in this book, and like the way he's kind of just like a guy who's there making occasional comments about stuff. I'm really interested in the way he's presented here, and I'm really intrigued by the story because essentially it's about a cop going to this serial killer town and looking for not necessarily his partner, but a cop friend of his as they're investigating where these serial killers came from. I really enjoy the way the series is creepy without being gross. Like, I think people probably got the impression that the series was going to be super gross from the cover to the first issue, and it's not really that at all. It's way more cerebral and smart than that. And the second issue has a twist that I really enjoy a lot. So if you're into sort of horror comics, but with sort of a psychological twist to it, a mystery twist, a Twin Peaksy feel, perhaps. That's something Josh Williamson actually said inspired him for this comic. Then I would say Nailbiter is something that you should definitely check out. Chris, there was one more comic that you wanted to talk about before we move on to our interview segment, correct?
That's right, Matt. This is not a monthly comic like we usually review here in this segment. It is actually the new paperback collection of a comic that I know I've written about several times, but I don't know if we've really talked about it a lot on Ajax. I can't recall.
When Daniel Kibblesmith was guest hosting with me, we talked about the first issue.
Ah, that's right, you jerks. You big jerks. We're talking, of course, about Afterlife with Archie, Book 1, Escape from Riverdale, by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa and Francesco Francavilla. And in case you've missed us talking about it on Comics Alliance, or if you missed that episode, this book's great. This book's fantastic. It has no right to be this good. I'm sure you've heard of it, but if you haven't, it's basically an adult-themed horror book set in the world of Archie, where Sabrina the Teenage Witch resurrects Hot Dog after he's run over secretly by Reggie Mantle, and Hot Dog bites Jughead, Jughead becomes a zombie, and all of Riverdale is soon engulfed in flames and the zombie apocalypse. I say adult-themed, which is a weird word to use to describe this book, but it's definitely like way more mature readers oriented than the standard Archie humor comics, and I think that's great. And one of the things that I really love about it is that you don't realize it until you see them in this setting, but the Archie characters are horror movie archetypes. They're the same bunch of teens.
Yeah, they really are.
And because Archie, because comedy and horror pretty much operate on the same principles, like that's the old joke about comedy and horror, they work so well. They work beautifully well in this book. Obviously Betty and Veronica are a little cattier towards each other. Archie has to kill his father. Jason Blossom and Cheryl Blossom are 100% in an incestuous relationship. So it's not quite what you get from the mainline titles. It's all kind of skewed into horror. But it's really, like I said, this book should not be this good. And it's great.
And I think what really makes it work really well is that it does not pull any punches at all. I think, at least when you're reading the first couple issues, I think as a reader, you're kind of sitting there expecting, okay, when's the gag coming? Right? When is something going to happen where this all turns into a big joke? And it stops being, for real terrifying horror. And it never does. It never totally, winks at the reader. And I think that is the perfect way to play it.
Yeah, it's the joke is that there is no joke. The joke is that it's 100% serious, shocking, horrifying horror, which is actually hilarious in its own right. I mean, you can't describe what happens in this book without laughing at it, even though it's very serious and straightforward horror stuff. But Archie beats his dad to death with a baseball bat because his dad's a zombie, while remembering all the good times they've shared.
Playing it completely straight is exactly the way to do this story. Because as soon as it becomes we all know this is a joke, it stops being funny.
Yeah,
so they did it exactly right.
Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa, his work in superhero comics really ran hot or cold for me, and so I wasn't sure what to expect out of this book, but I interviewed him before it came out, and talking with him for 20 minutes about it, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be amazing, because he's a dude who not only loves Archie, he loves Archie comics, but he also gets it in a way that that a lot of people, I don't think, do. Which is probably why they made him the chief creative officer of the company shortly after the first issue came out. It's a great time to mention Afterlife with Archie. Not only is it out in paperback this week, but also they just announced that there is going to be a Sabrina series spinning out of this universe. So they are expanding their horror line. The question is, how much of the horror line are they going to expand? And in 5 years, are we only going to have these Archie comics? I don't think we will, obviously, but I'm glad to see that they're sticking with Aguirre-Sacasa as the writer on that one too, and I think it's going to be really, really solid.
Yeah, I think
good job, Archie Comics.
I think it'll work. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to this clip from next week's episode of War Rocket Ajax. Again, if you want to hear the full episode, where we talk to Meg Lovell of Tagged, where we add some more comics to our Every Story Ever list, and we just do some checks and recs like we always do. I talk about my birthday. Be sure to check out us on warrocketajax.com or on iTunes. Until then, until next week, everybody, and until we show up here again in a week on comicsalliance.com, have a great week.